Okay, chapter 27. The pony was where Eric had told her it would be. It stood tethered to a sapling, its hindquarters turned patiently to the icy wind that was bringing the snow. Snow clouds lower over Shalom. Evelyn untied the rope brindle, and the little horse came docilely along. Above their heads the wind sighed through the pine needles, sounding like some strange inland surf as it stirred the snow-clad branches. Will followed her dumbly, staggering in the calf-deep snow that covered the path. It was hard going for Evelyn, but even harder for the boy, exhausted and worn out as he was from weeks of hard labor with insufficient food or warmth. Soon she knew she should stop and find the warm clothing that Eric had said was inside the pack on the pony's back, and she'd probably need to let Will ride the pony if they were to make any distance before dawn. But for the moment she wanted to delay, no matter how short. All her instincts told her to continue, to put as much distance as possible between them and this Canadian township, and to do it as fast as she could. The path wound up into the mountains, and she leaned forward into the wind, leading the pony with one hand and holding Will's icy cold hand in the other. Together they stumbled on, slipping on the thick snow, staggering over tree roots and rocks that were hidden beneath the smooth surface. After half an hour's travelling, she felt the first tentative flakes of snow brushing her face as they fell. Then they were tumbling down in earnest, heavy and thick. She paused, looking at the path behind them, where their footprints were already half obscured. Eric had known it would snow heavily tonight, she thought. He had waited until his sailor's instinct had told him that all signs of their passage would be covered. For the first time since she had crept out of the lodge's open gateway, she felt her heart lift with hope. Perhaps, after all, things would work out for them. Behind her, Will stumbled and, muttering incoherently, fell to his knees in the snow. She turned to him and realized that he was shivering and blue with the cold, virtually done in. Moving to the pack slung over the pony's back, she unlaced the fastening and rummaged inside. There was a thick sheepskin vest, among other items, and she draped it around the shivering boy's shoulders, helping him push his arms through the armholes. He stared at her dully as she did so. He was a dumb animal, mutely accepting whatever befell him. She could hit him, she knew, and he would make no attempt to avoid the blow or to strike back at her. Sadly, she contemplated him, remembering him as he had been. Eric had said he could possibly recover, although very few warm wheat addicts ever got the chance. Isolated in the mountains as they would be, Bill was going to have every opportunity to break the vicious cycle of the drug. She prayed now that the Scandinavian jar was right, and that it was possible for an addict deprived of warm weed to make a full recovery. She shoved an unresisting boy towards the pony, motioning for him to climb astride. For a moment he hesitated, then clumsily he hauled himself up onto the saddle and sat there, swaying uncertainly as she headed out again, following the forest pathway as it led them up into the mountains. Around them the fat flakes of snow continued to tumble down. Eric watched the two figures move furtively off into the forest, taking the fork that he had described to Evelyn. Satisfied that they were on their way, he followed them out of the stockade, but continued past the point where they had turned off and headed for the harbour instead. There were no sentries posted at the Great Hall at this time of year. There was no fear of attackers, as the thick snow covering the mountains around them were more effective than any human sentries. But Eric was more cautious as he approached the harbour front. A watch was kept here to ensure that the wolf-ship rode safely at their mornings. At their mornings? Moorings. A sudden squall could see the ships dragging their anchors and being cast up on the shore, and so a few men were posted to give warning and rouse the duty crews in case of danger, but they could just as easily see him and wonder what he was doing at this time of night, so he stayed in the shadows where he could. His own ship, Wolfwind, was moored to the harbour quay, and he boarded her as silently, knowing that there was no duty crew present. He dismissed them that afternoon, relying on his reputation as a weather forecaster to reassure them that there would be no strong winds that night. He leaned over the outboard bulwark, and there, floating in the lee of the ship, was the small skiff he had moored there earlier in the day. He glanced at the way the boats in the harbour rowed to their moorings, and saw that the tide was still running out. He had timed his arrival to coincide with the falling tide, and now he climbed quickly down into the small craft. He felt around in the stern for the drainage plug and pulled it loose. The icy water crashed in over his hands. When the boat was half full, he replaced the plug and heaved himself back over the rail onto the wolf ship. Drawing his dagger, he cut through the painter holding the skiff alongside. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the little craft, already sitting lower in the water, began to slide astern slowly at first, then with increasing speed as the tide drew it along. There was no there was one oar in the boat, set in the rowlock. He'd arranged it that way in case the boat was found in the next few days. The combination of an empty boat, apparently swamped and half full of water, with one oar missing, would all point to an accident. The skiff drifted down harbour, becoming lost to sight among the larger craft that crowded the anchorage. I have no idea what I'm reading like at all. Satisfied that he had done all he could, Eric slipped back ashore and retraced the steps to the great hall. As he went, he noticed with satisfaction that the heavy snow had already obliterated the tracks he had made earlier. By morning, there would be no sign that anyone had passed this way. The missing boat and the cut painter would be the only clues as to where the escaped slaves had gone. The going was harder as the pathway through the forest grew steeper. Evelyn's breath came in ragged gasps and hung on the frigid air in great clouds of steam. The slight wind that had stirred the pines earlier had died away as the snow began to fall. Her throat and mouth were dry, and there was no unpleasant brassy taste, and there was an unpleasant brassy taste in her mouth. She had tried to ease her thirst several times with handfuls of snow, but the relief was short-lived. The intense cold of the snow undid any benefit that she might have from the got from the small amount of water that trickled down her throat as the snow melted. She glanced behind her. The pony was trudging doggedly in her tracks, head down and seemingly unaffected by the cold. Bill was a huddled shape on top of the pony's pack, wrapped deep in the folds of the sheepskin vest. He moaned softly and continuously. She paused for a moment, breathing raggedly, taking in huge gulps of the freezing air. It bit almost painfully at the back of her throat. The muscles in the backs of her thighs and calves were aching and trembling from the effort of driving on through the thick snow, but she knew she had to keep going as long as she could. She had no idea how far she had travelled from the lodge at Halsham, but she suspected it was not far enough. If Eric's attempt to lay a false trail was unsuccessful, she had no doubt that a party of able-bodied Canadians could cover the ground she and Will had travelled in less than an hour. Eric's instructions were to get as far up the mountain as possible before dawn came. Then they must get off the pathway and into the cover of the thick trees where she and Will could hide out for the day. She looked up at the narrow gap through the trees above her. The thick overcast hid any sign of the moon or stars. She had no idea how late it was or how soon the dawn might come. Miserably, with every muscle in her legs protesting, she started upward again, the pony trailing solidly behind her. For a moment she considered climbing up onto the saddle behind Will and riding a double. Then she dismissed the notion. It was only a small pony, and while he might carry one person and their packs uncomplainingly, a double load in these conditions would quickly tire him. Knowing how much depended on the shaggy little beast, she reluctantly decided that it was best for her to continue on foot. If she exhausted the pony, it would well be a death sentence for Will. She'd never keep him moving, exhausted and weakened as she was. She trudged on, lifting each foot clear of the snow, planting it down, slipping slightly as it crunched through the ever-thickening ground cover, complicating it until she had a firm footing once more. Left foot, left foot, right foot, mouth drain, mouth drier than ever, breath still clouding on their ear and hanging in the still night behind her, briefly marking where she had passed. Unthinkingly, she began to count the paces as she took them. There was no reason to it. She wasn't consciously trying to measure distance. It was an instinctive reaction to the constant, repetitive rhythm she had established. She reached 200 and started again, reached it again and started from one once more. Then, after several more times, she realized that she had no idea how many times she had reached that 200 mark, and she stopped counting. Within 20 steps, she became aware that she was counting again. She shrugged. This time, she decided she'd count to 400 before starting back at one again. Anything for a little variety, she thought with grim humor. The thick flakes of snow continued falling, brushing her face and matting her hair and her hair pure white. Her face was growing numb, and she rubbed it vigorously with the back of her hand, realized the hand was numb as well, and stopped to look through the pack once more. She had seen gloves in there when she'd found the vest for Will. She located them again, thick wool gauntlets with a bum piece and a single space for the rest of her fingers. She pulled them onto her freezing hands, swinging her arms, slapping her hands against her ribs, up and under her armpits to stimulate the circulation. After a few minutes of this, she felt a brief tingle of returning sensation and began walking again. The pony had stopped when she did. Now, patiently, it moved off again in her footprints. She reached 400 and started back at 1. Okay, well, it seems like we have reached chapter 28. So if you'd like to listen to me read, yeah. So I'd like to thank you very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Stay posted. Bye-bye.